Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 6 p.m. in Dallas, Texas. And it's 7 p.m. in New York City. Hello, everybody. I'm Mad Dog Scipio. Joining me tonight for his third and hopefully not his final appearance on our show, Big Lou Ferrante. Lou, how are you, my friend? I always get nervous because you're right at you come right at the 7 o'clock mark, which is perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
We are talking tonight. Boy, we got a good one, Lou. I was just telling everybody, we got a major event tonight inside the American Mafia, the Kennedy-Hoffa connections, and to walk us through this muck and mire of a maze is Lou Ferrante. He is a best-selling author, television host. He is also a former member of the Gambino crime family led by the boss, John Gotti, the late John Gotti. And Lou is you've been described, Lou, as a veritable encyclopedia on the history of the mob. Let's talk a little bit right off from the beginning of the show, right off the bat here. When did your interest in mob lore really take hold in you? Was it before or after you became a part of the life?
Believe it or not, when you're part of that world, you have no idea, other than the oral history that you get from different people, you have no idea about the real history of the mob. I would bet my life people like Carlo Gambino, John Gotti, Joe Massino, they never understood real mafia history other than what they might have heard from different people. I was in Sicily and met Lord George Weidenfeld, the publishing mogul of the 20th century. And He asked me to write a history. That's the first time I really dove into the history of the world I was involved in. And until then, I never knew anything really about it. It was all like very blurry to me. And for the first time, names I had heard, Lucky Luciano, Albert Anastasia, Costello, these names, of course, I heard of. Vito Genovese was the founder of the Genovese family. I understood that.
Sure.
But I really didn't know the history behind these people when they came to America, what they did, what they got pinched for, what they were involved with, how they intrigued against each other. That was all. I mean, I took a deep dive, and 7 years, I read hundreds, if not thousands of books on the subject. And I'm an avid reader, as you could see, so I enjoyed every bit of it.
I was going to say that's, by the way, folks, that's not just a backdrop. That's an actual library.
Yeah.
That's in your home, Lou?
It is. It's one of the libraries in my house. That's right. I got a
library.
Yeah, I have two other ones in the house.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have to come to see that crib sometime.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about not really having much of a history for the mob or the mafia lifestyle until you got into the life. It's what's even more so interesting to me is that once you have a taste of it, you want to learn more. As witnessed, at least in my case, and witnessed by people in Philadelphia, which is the closest mob territory, if you want to call it. To me, it's like 15 minutes away. And those guys could tell you everything. I mean, they can tell you what happened when and who did what and who whacked who and all this, who was the boss. It's remarkable because you don't normally think of I'm laughing because I know where it's going. You don't normally think of mafioso as being incredibly well learned,
Mm.
because
Mm.
they're usually a bunch of big neck mamalukes that
Mhm.
go,
Mhm.
what kind of sandwich you want today?
I found books in prison. So had I never gone to prison, I probably would have never learned anything, never read about anything. I wouldn't understand history. I would have never read all the biographies I've read, science, law, and even mafia history. I mean, these are all things that once you're locked in a cell and you're isolated for years with
Yeah.
nothing to do but either play cards or read,
Or
at
read.
that point, I was starving for something more than just, the card games. I played gin rummy every day. I
Sure.
played pinochle. We played spades. We always, another, 10, 15 hours a day. You blow the whole day. You
Yeah.
walk the yard a little, you get into some drama with people, wise guys who are locked up in jail. Very few people ever talk about this. They're kind of like looking for the life still. So they cause a lot of drama amongst each other. So we have downs, we walk the yard. This guy said this. He said, if you don't get the pasta from the kitchen and bring it to me instead of Joey Two Eyes and Frankie Three Eyes, and beefing over a pound of macaroni. And it's nonstop, just idling away the days. And at some point I said, you know what? If I pick up a book, I would kill 18 hours a day with my nose in a book. It was incredible, Ange. And that's where I found.
And that therein lies the next question. You mentioned, what do you do in prison?
Mhm.
You vegetate,
Mhm.
you work out, you read, or you cause a bunch of shit.
Mhm. That's right.
Okay. And God knows these fucking guys are big enough. They don't need to work. I saw you, brother. You were jacked.
Oh yeah. I used to break from my book and do 1,000 push-ups and then go right back to my book. So
that's crazy.
In my cell. Yeah. So, or sometimes I do it in the yard if I took a walk in the yard. I mean, hardly did I take my nose out of the book. So I would do a half-hour calisthenic workout, and I was jacked. It's true. You could see pictures on the website.
I have. Absolutely. You find literature, or you find God in prison?
Yeah.
I found how many people find God in prison.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, you and I, Lou, talked peripherally about this on our last episode. But we're going to talk tonight about the real mob connection between Jimmy Hoffa and John F. Kennedy. And when we talk about Kennedy, we have to be inclusive, and we're talking about Bobby Kennedy as well. You can't talk about John without, especially during the assassination.
That's right.
You can't talk about one without talking about the other. Give everybody a kind of a teaser of Borgata inside the American Mafia, because you do have quite a bit of information on the Kennedy connection to Jimmy Hoffa, the assassination, who was involved, names like Santo Trafficante, Sam Giancana, Carlos Marsala. These are names everybody's heard, but there's a few names that people haven't heard. So if you would take us on a kind of literary journey inside the world in which you once lived, and take us back to 1963, November 22nd, Dallas, Texas.
Okay. So Borgata, Rise of Empire, Volume 1 ends just as the Kennedys are about to get elected into office. I say the Kennedys because you got it exactly right, Ange. One brother was the same as the other. And there are time and time again testimonies from friends and political colleagues that they said, if you were talking to John, you were talking to Bobby. If you were talking to Bobby, you were talking to John, or Jack, as they referred to him much of the time. So Jack Kennedy gets in. He becomes president of the United States. He appoints Bobby, who was very inexperienced, as an attorney general. Experienced in the sense that he was very young. He was a fraction of J. Edgar Hoover's age, who was the head of the FBI for as long as Bobby was, from when Bobby was born. He was head of the FBI. So Hoover now is controlling the FBI, which is within the Justice Department, and the Attorney General controls the Justice Department. So the FBI falls under his domain, Bobby's. So Bobby immediately tried to be friendly with Hoover. Hoover tried to be friendly with Bobby, but they locked horns. They had issues because Bobby wanted to control everything that he was under, that everything was under him. So at some point or another, Frank Sinatra, who was the liaison between Joe Kennedy Sr. when he was a bootlegger, when he was in Hollywood making B flicks, He was the liaison between Joe Kennedy Sr. much of the time and the mob. Sinatra convinces the New York mob bosses and the Chicago mob bosses that they should stand behind Kennedy. That if Kennedy is elected president, even though Bobby has been a ball buster all these years going after the mob during the McClellan Committee, which was referred to as the Rackets Committee, he subpoenaed all the mobsters, he gave them hell. Even though he was a buster, we're going to tell you right now, the Kennedys are going to move on to bigger issues like civil rights in America, bigger issues like the Cold War and the Soviets, Vietnam, Berlin, etc. And we're going to leave the mob behind. That was the word that Sinatra was able to give to the mob. When the Kennedys get in, as you said, once again, the Kennedys get in, both of them, get into that Oval Office, and Bobby's always up his brother's fazul. He's always there. When they get into that Oval Office, all of a sudden, Bobby starts going after, as Attorney General, the mob. And he kind of basically went back on all his promises that Sinatra made to the mob. And the promises were made by Joe Kennedy, not necessarily Bobby and Jack.
Yeah.
But Joe Kennedy had a stroke at some point. So Joe Kennedy's taken out of the picture now, Ange. And at some point, the mob's trying to get a hold of Joe. They can't. He had a stroke. So now they're telling Sinatra, go see Jack, go see Bobby, talk to them, tell them to back off.
Yeah.
He's coming after us with everything he's got. This is not why we put him in. And at some point or another, at the same time, simultaneously, the CIA wants to take out Fidel Castro, who took over Cuba. And they reach out to the mob, knowing the mob wanted Cuba back too for their Havana casinos. So they're working hand in hand with the mob. And the mob's going, we're working with the United States government to get rid of Castro. Meanwhile, we got Bobby trying to lock us up every day. This is something.
I've got a question for you, Lou. Right about there. I read something yesterday in preparation for the show. There's some speculation that old man Kennedy, Joseph Kennedy Sr., because there was a Joseph Kennedy Jr. who passed. Joe Kennedy Sr., President Kennedy's father, it was believed was indebted to the mafia financially, because when he came over as an immigrant from Ireland, they helped him get set up in business financially. They lent him money. It is documented, and there's no question about this. It's documented that Joe Kennedy was a bootlegger. He what they used to call, Lou, a rum runner. And we know that factually. He did run illegal alcohol, particularly during the Prohibition days. Okay, so and that would make sense to me just from a common sense standpoint. He would have an obligation to these gentlemen, loosely use that word, because he's now using their money to make money.
Yeah. Well, also,
would that make sense to you?
It would make sense that he was indebted to them. And he also had, there were 1,000 illicit relationships between Joe Kennedy and mobsters, whether in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Chicago, or New York. Time and again, when Bobby was chief counsel for the Rackets Committee, his father's name would pop up. And the guys under him would bust his chops about it and say, your father's name popped up once again. Your father's name popped up here. Your father's name popped up there. And Bobby was embarrassed because he knew his money was, quote unquote, poisonous.
Yeah.
And he had
dirty money. Yeah.
Yeah, he said it was dirty money and he knew it, but he would try to avoid his father. Now, at some point or another, when he went after the Rackets, by the way, Joe Kennedy warned him against it. He did not want him going down that route, Bobby. And he had a big blowout with him. It was the first time Bobby ever stuck up to his father. Usually he was like a lapdog with his father. And at some point or another, he says, Dad, I'm doing this on my own. I don't care if you're behind me or not. I'm doing it. And then, and the reason why few people talk about this, Ange, the reason why Bobby was appointed Attorney General was Jack. Supposedly the election was so close.
Yeah.
Kennedy just eked it out with Nixon. And it was like out of millions and millions of votes, it was like won by 100,000. And they believed that the mob.
Very slim margin, Lou. Very slim margin. People don't realize. And I'm going to scare everybody from it. You don't realize, ladies and gentlemen, over the age of 65 or 70-ish thereabouts, how close Richard Milhouse Nixon became to becoming president of the United States in 1960. They don't realize just how close that election was. It was what they would call a nail biter or a squeaker, whatever you want to call it, but it
That's
was
right.
a close election.
Right, Ange.
My
And
question to you in that regard,
Mhm.
again, it's been alleged, and I'm guessing now we can probably prove it through, attrition and history, but it's been alleged at the time that again, mob influenced money and mob
Mhm.
influenced individuals. Frank Sinatra,
Mhm.
Dean Martin to a lesser extent, Peter Lawford
Mhm.
very directly,
Mhm.
who was related to the Kennedys by marriage. Excuse
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk about that, like
Yeah.
that hub there,
Yeah.
the power brokers, Lou,
Yeah. So
the people that
aside
made this happen.
Yeah, so aside from the fact that the mob is dumping money into the Kennedy campaign, and they are, there was a lot of people who were bag men and bag women who were bringing money to the campaign for the mob,
Yeah.
and Sinatra was always a connection. But besides that, Giancana, Sam Momo Giancana out of
Sure.
Chicago, acting boss, Chicago mob, Chicago outfit. He controls the very, very crucial districts and wards in Chicago that Kennedy needed to swing the vote in Chicago. And because of Giancana, and Giancana would be caught on tape, J. Edgar Hoover
Mhm.
would hear him later saying, that son of a bitch Kennedy, I gave him the election by swinging those wards for him.
Yep.
And Hoover approached the Kennedys with that information and says, look, I got to let you guys know, this is what I'm picking up on bugs. So
Yeah.
this is interesting. And Hoover always kept his bugs close to the chest. He never revealed them.
Oh,
But
sure.
in this instance, he wanted to kind of like give the Kennedys a heads up. I know some dirt about you guys. That's
Yeah.
how Hoover always stayed in power. So there's three moving parts though, Ann. So the mob gets him in, and then the mob is getting basically persecuted by him. I don't want to say prosecuted. I really do say persecuted, and
Mhm.
because Bobby would break the law. Tons of groups of civil libertarians around the country would constantly tell Bobby, you can't do these things that you're doing to lock people up. Bobby would easily skirt the law because he felt like he had the moral righteousness behind him to lock up the mob. I'm the good guy, you're the bad guys. If I have to go around the law and become an
Mhm.
outlaw to get outlaws, it's okay. That's how
Yeah.
Bobby felt. But the mob feels, and I could tell you this from my own experience, when the agents play fair, we shrug when we get locked up. They played fair. They got me. What can
Yeah.
I do? But when they
Exactly.
play dirty, that's when you hear a lot of guys in the cell going, son of a bitch bastard, I want to kill him. I want to run a machete through his heart. I want to cut his head off. You hear guys yelling
Yeah.
because
Sure.
they feel like they played dirty. And so there is sort of like, you believe that the government should be higher than you, even when you're in the mob. You believe
Yeah.
that the government should play by fairer rules than you play. And Bobby was
Yeah.
going to go around that. So the mob hates him. So that's conspirator number one is the mob. Conspirator number two, after the Bay of Pigs invasion, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, which is,
Yeah.
so your listeners have a little background.
Oh,
After
sure.
Castro takes over and gets Batista out of Cuba, he throws out the entire mob, but he also threw out all the U.S. corporations. We had $7 billion in investments in Cuba. And now
Lou, let's talk about some of them corporations. AT&T, IBM, Bell Telephone.
that's right.
Um,
That's right.
oh my God.
Fruit companies, gas and oil
Right.
companies. Yep.
Yeah.
Sugar companies. Yep.
It's just remarkable the amount of trade and
Mhm.
the commerce that was coming out of Cuba
Right.
was tantamount to several small nations, GDP.
That's right. That's
It
100%
was a
right.
lot of cash.
That was crucial to us. And don't forget, it's
Yeah.
90 miles off the coast of Florida. It's almost like part of the United States.
All cash money, Lou.
Exactly.
It was
But
all cash.
And at the same time, you would have Santo Trafficante and Carlos Marcello running around Havana at their casinos. Who else was visiting the casinos at that same point? Richard Milhouse Nixon, John Fitzgerald Kennedy as senators, as a vice president. They're
Yep.
going there and they're hanging out in the same hotels. That's how close the mob was with the politicians, with the corporations. So they're all in Havana together. So at some point, the exiles who leave after Batista is ousted by Castro and Castro becomes a tyrant, all of the Cuban exiles who flood Miami, and they say, look, we want our island back. We want our homeland back. We're willing to fight for it. They had courage. They said, we're willing to fight for it. We don't need America. Just train us, give us the guns, and we'll go back and fight them. But the CIA who trains them tells them, look, we're going to land you in the Bay of Pigs, which is this beachhead. We're going to land you there and you're going to fight inland. But we promise you, if you have a hard time, because you may be outnumbered at some point, we're going to back you with air power and sea power. We promise you that. So they said, fine, let's go. So they invade the island. And then all of a sudden, Kennedy, in the midst of the invasion, the Cuban exiles are literally on the beach and they're fighting for their lives. And the CIA says to Kennedy, look, they need air power. They need air cover. They're fighting like bastards, but they're not going to hold it forever. We got to get them inland. And he said, no, I do not want the United States to look like a bully because it's a small island. And they said, no, you can't leave these guys. You can't abandon them. We train them. And he said, no. So now the CIA is beside themselves, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who are all hawks, all wanted to get Cuba back. And they're pissed as shit at Kennedy. They're literally living, Ange. So now next thing, not long later, Ange, the missile crisis comes along.
Oh, God, yeah.
The Soviet Union is putting nuclear warheads 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And so once again, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA tell Jack Kennedy, listen, here's our opportunity. We don't have to fake some type of phony attack at Guantanamo. We don't have to fake some type of phony attack at sea. The warheads are there. We have every right to go in and take the island. Let's send in the Marines. And Kennedy once again says no. So now you got the
Luke, I have to stop you there for a second. It's the second time in a matter of literal weeks, okay? Several weeks that he said no. Here's the underlying question. Was it a power move? He said no because he could, or did he have intel to back up the no?
Well, he was concerned. So Jack Kennedy was concerned with a couple of different things. One is he feared a nuclear holocaust, and he feared that if we invaded Cuba, because to get rid of the missiles, he feared that the Soviets would maybe retaliate with a nuclear strike or retaliate in places like East and West Berlin, where we were obviously in the midst of a Cold War there. My father was stationed there in the 50s. It was hectic. So now you have, maybe they'll jump off in Berlin. Maybe they'll jump off in Southeast Asia. Maybe they'll cause us problems in other parts of the world. And it could easily escalate into a nuclear conflict. So Jack Kennedy was concerned with that. The other thing he was concerned with is he figured that we would look like massive bullies as he wanted to come in as a president who was strong, but after peace. He wanted to be the peace president. And these guys, the hawks during the Cold War who were in his administration are going, you got to be kidding me. This is the Monroe Doctrine. This is our part of the world. You can't have communism here. And they believed in the Latin American communist domino effect. If Cuba falls, which it did, all of the other Latin American countries could go red. And then we'll have an entire lower Americas will all be red, and we'll have communism all over the place. We can't allow it. So they're fighting with Jack. Jack keeps saying, well, I don't want a nuclear holocaust. What happens if the Russians strike back? And the Joint Chiefs are going, for the most part, they're not going to strike back. Curtis LeMay, in particular, who was a World War II hero, he's going, let's go in there. Let's kick some effing butt. We don't have to worry about what the Russians are going to do. And even if they did, we could out bomb them with nuclear warheads by 10-1. Don't worry about it. And Kennedy's going, I can't imagine children getting incinerated. To Kennedy's credit, if he really did believe that, he didn't want a war. He didn't want a nuclear holocaust. Okay, whatever the case is, the hawks in his administration, the hawks in the Pentagon, the hawks in the CIA were livid. So now you got the Mafia. You mad at him already for the prosecutions that Bobby's doing. Now you got the right-wing hawks in the CIA and the Joint Chiefs of Staff beside themselves with Kennedy. Even the liberals in his administration were mad at him. There were liberals going, get in there. Not only the Hawks, there were even left-wing. It's a left-wing administration.
Oh, sure.
Even part of Kennedy's administration, who he brought in, were telling him, let's go. Let's go. It was basically just Jack and Bobby and a few other people going, no. So now you have the mob and you have the CIA and the military.
Mm-hmm.
Now the last part of the puzzle is the exiles, the Cuban exiles. They're
Absolutely.
told, we had 2 opportunities now. You abandoned us. We're never going to get our homeland back. And Arthur Schlesinger, who was part of the Kennedy administration, he was originally, I think, a Harvard professor, but he became part of the administration because he knew the Kennedys.
Sure.
And at some point or another, he's the preeminent biographer of Bobby, wrote a great 2-volume biography of Bobby Kennedy. And he also wrote other books about the Kennedys. And he basically said that the Cuban exiles passed remarks like, if Kennedy was gone, maybe we would have a friend in the White House who would do what we need to do to get our homeland back. And they desperately wanted it. So there's the 3 moving parts, Ange. You got the CIA, you got the Mafia, and you got the Cuban exiles. And they're all in bed together trying to kill Castro and take back Cuba. At one point or another, David Ferry, who was involved in all of this, and close friends with Marcello, working on one of Marcello's federal cases, and also close friends with the CIA and also close friends with the Cuban exiles. He said, why are we wasting our time trying to kill Fidel? If we killed Kennedy, the public would be so mad that they demand an invasion, and then we'd have Johnson replace him, and Johnson would give us the invasion we want. Now, it didn't work out that way,
right?
But there's evidence to suggest that that's exactly how they planned.
Yeah.
And
in the meantime, the public would have completely forgotten about Cuba.
At some point or another,
yeah, and Castro was free to do what he wanted anyway, which he did
for the next 60 years.
Think about that.
Yeah,
you had the 2 long reigns of power here. J. Edgar Hoover, who passed in the 1970s, headed up the agency in the 30s. Okay, we're talking about a guy who ran for almost just shy of 50 years as head of the FBI.
That's
Fidel
right.
Castro came in as a fighting guerrilla, and promised the moon and delivered squat to Cuba, squalor and poverty, but in the process made himself a hell of a millionaire, and made himself a folk hero, believe it or not. And all this muck and mire, as I said at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy created for himself, and this is my opinion, Lou, and please comment on this. John F. Kennedy created for himself the perfect storm for an assassination.
You couldn't have said it better, Ange. You couldn't have said it better. Even Hoover, you just mentioned Hoover. So I went through the mob, the CIA, and the Cuban exiles. Well, let's throw Hoover into the mix. Hoover has been there, as you said, like 50 years, right?
Yeah.
He's been through how many presidents? 6, 8 presidents or whatever by then? Whatever the case.
6 or 7 for sure, yeah.
Nobody ever tries to get rid of Hoover. The Kennedys get in. Not only did they axe Allen Dulles from the CIA, they told him you got to resign after the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
He's gone. Next, they said, we're going to get rid of Hoover. He's an old dinosaur. We want him out. Now, every comment they made about Hoover, nasty, derogatory comments about Hoover, got back to Hoover. So Hoover knows the Kennedys want him out. And the plan was, once we get in for their second term, the first thing we're going to do is tell Hoover mandatory retirement, get the hell out. You got to go. And we're going to get rid of him. This scared Hoover to death. Hoover never wanted to lose his power. That FBI, he sculpted it from a piece of rough marble. That was his bureau. And he did not want to give it up. So now at some point, all of these tape recordings, Hoover's got bugs planted in mob hangouts around the country.
Yeah.
At some point during around 1962 and 63, Hoover's starting to get all of these these transcripts across his desk of mobsters going, we're going to kill that SOB. I'd run in there right now and kill him if I could. We're going to kill that SOB. It's him and his brothers got to go. Maybe we should kill the father too. We should kill all of them. Everybody should get killed, all the Kennedys. And Hoover's not saying a word to nobody about it.
Right.
The only bug he mentions was the Giancana bug about the election, because he wanted to throw threatened to the Kennedys. He wanted to rub it in their ass and say, I got
Yeah.
dirt on this. But he's not
Mhm.
talking about the assassinations they're talking about. At one point or another, a Cuban exile is in having lunch with Santo Trafficante in Florida.
Right.
Trafficante is trying to secure a Teamster loan from Jimmy Hoffa for a hotel that they're
Yeah.
going to partner with together. And at some point or another, Jose Alaman was his name. He says, he
Yes.
says, I think Kennedy's going to win the second term. And Trafficante says it's never going to happen. He says, how do you know? And he says he's going to be hit before the election. He said, what? He goes, oh, yeah, it's going to be hit before the election. It's done. It's already in the bag. Done. Finished. So he goes, how do you know that? He goes, I know it. Don't worry, Jose. Jose Alaman was doubling as a federal informant.
Yeah.
He ran right to the FBI, Ange, and told the FBI
Oh, yeah.
agents in Miami, Florida, what he just heard. Those agents reported it back to Hoover. You know what Hoover did about it? Nothing.
Zero. Not a
So
fucking thing.
not a thing. So Hoover actually, I'm not gonna make the jump and say Hoover was part of the conspiracy, but I will say he knew when to put cotton in his ears.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
He absolutely knew when to put cotton in his ears. He was also a guy who had his ears, talking about his ears, he had his ears to the ground. You know, that old man, played dumb as often as he wanted to, but make no mistake, J. Edgar Hoover was one smart cat.
That's right.
He knew he was a great poker player. He knew when to hold them,
Mhm.
and he knew when to fold them, and he knew when not to take a card.
That's right.
He knew when not to take a card. I'll give him that.
Mhm.
He was a sneaky bastard too.
Yeah, he was, but I got to
Because-
tell you,
Oh yeah, because Lou, he was playing. You know this from your history.
Mhm.
He was playing both ends against the middle.
yes.
He was, and it's Freedom of Information Act. No secrets, folks.
Mhm.
He was having a homosexual affair with Johnny Roselli, a made guy.
Well, the guy, so supposedly what Bobby did too, where Bobby crossed the line, is Bobby was always very, very, he was scathing in his denunciations against people very badly.
Yeah.
Bobby was. He was a bully.
Yeah.
And Bobby first of all, he wanted his Justice Department to uncover
Yeah.
that Hoover was a homosexual. That's number one. So this got back to Hoover, number one. So he's willing to destroy this man that gets back to the man.
Yeah.
The number two is he would make comments like Hoover has to sit down to pee. That's a really nasty thing to say about somebody.
Sure, it is.
Hoover has-
Absolutely.
Yeah, Hoover, he would call him Miss Edna Hoover instead of Edgar Hoover,
Mhm.
referring to he's maybe feminine. Now, don't forget now, we live in a world where it's no big deal to if you have homosexual friends or neighbors, it's free, it's open. We believe that it's everyone's sexual preference for the most part, as Americans we do. But in the 1960s, you had to stay in the closet. You couldn't have gays running around going, we have a gay parade next Monday and we're going to have the rainbow, the rainbows on the White House. This was a career killer and a
Oh,
life
God,
reputation
yeah.
killer.
Sure.
So now Hoover's got Bobby threatening to unravel his personal life. He has every reason to want the Kennedys gone. So I'm not telling you
absolutely.
Hoover was partaking in the conspiracy. I won't go that far. I have not found evidence to suggest that he took part in it. However,
Mhm.
by sheer negligence, you can consider him an active co-conspirator because, as the law says, if you and 4 or 5 guys, Ange, are planning to kill the president of the United States,
Yeah.
and I'm privy to the conversations, it's incumbent upon me to report that to authorities. If
Yes.
I don't, they could charge me. So technically, Hoover was he was culpable of something. So it is what it is. But Hoover wanted.
We have for decades we have called this the Great Conspiracy. I want to remind people that a conspiracy, and let's just talk about the term.
Mhm.
A conspiracy is defined as an agreement with 2 people or more who agree not to tell a third or fourth party. And it's simply a couple of people keeping a secret.
That's right.
That's a conspiracy.
That's right. That's
How
right.
did this turn into one of the God Almighty, one of the best kept conspiracies
Mhm.
of all time? And
Very
we know that
Mhm.
a lone gunman named Lee Oswald,
Mhm.
the poor bastard said it himself. He's a patsy.
Yeah.
I mean, they got this guy. They made him dead fast, and they used a mob guy, a mob connected guy to do it, named Rubenstein. Who had connections to the Italian guys, but he also had connections to the Jewish guys.
Hoover knew that. Hoover knew. Hoover's immediate reaction to when Ruby killed Oswald was, it's a mob hit. Someone's doing something to shut somebody up. He knew right away. He couldn't say that to the public, but privately, everyone knew that. Earl Warren knew it. Allen Dulles knew it. J. Edgar Hoover knew it. Everybody in the Warren Commission knew it, but couldn't say it again. Yeah,
absolutely.
So
now let's talk about those moving parts, Lou. This is where the rubber meets the road, and some interesting characters come forward out of the woodwork, so to speak. Guys like David Ferry, Carlo Marsala, Santo Trafficante, guys like Lee Oswald, who plays peripherally into all of this, but he was a scapegoat, essentially.
That's right.
But you got other guys, a guy named Kennedy making trouble for a guy named Kennedy, and a guy named Hoover making trouble for a guy named Kennedy, and never the twain shall meet, because apparently they had such, from what I read, they had such a fractured relationship between the FBI and the Justice Department that Bobby and J. Edgar barely spoke to each other. And there's the two agencies, Lou, the Department of Justice and the FBI, who's supposed to work like this. And they barely even connected. Talk to me about all of these, the colorful cast of characters here.
Yeah. So another thing Bobby was, aside from all of the attacks I mentioned that he had done to Hoover, Bobby was such a I guess a bullying, tyrannical person that he installed a phone line in Hoover's office that when he hit a button, Hoover would have to respond and come to his office, to the Attorney General's office from the FBI.
That's absolutely true, folks. He's
and
not making not a word of that up. It's absolutely true.
And he would taunt a man. So if he had somebody, Bobby had a friend one time. He had a friend in the office, and he says, "You want to see me? You want to see me run Hoover around?" He says, "Yeah, that'd be great." He goes, "Watch this," and he hits the button, and Hoover runs in. He's sweating, trying to get there fast, and he says, "Well, what's going on, Attorney General?" And he says, "Nothing." And they were hysterical laughing. You're laughing at the guy who runs Washington.
Yeah.
How long before you think this bites you in the ass? You're a 30-something-year-old kid. So, and the other thing Hoover said, Hoover had a very, he didn't want to bother with the mob. Hoover had looked into the mob, and he knew that the mob's tentacles went deep into the American industry, into the American union labor movement, into American political movement, into law enforcement. He knew that they bought everybody, and everybody was on the take. Half the people in Congress, governors, mayors, they had everybody. So Hoover knew if you do a deep dive, a deep probe into the mafia, you're going to end up right here in Washington. Do we want that? Do we want to look into the Cal Neva Lodge, where your father, Joe Kennedy Sr., is partners with Sam Giancana and Frank Sinatra, where all the mob meets to have sit-downs while your father is there, while they all fool around with Marilyn Monroe and drug her up and gangbang and everything else that people testified happened there? Do you want that coming out? He said to Bobby, "You don't want this. You don't want to go down that road." And Bobby kept pushing, and he kept taunting and teasing Hoover, and he kept going down that road, and he made nothing but enemies. And why it's perfect murder to this day, Ange, is when you got all those people that hate you. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're on the street, if you got a good rabbi, a good skipper, a good capo, good guy behind you, a tough guy,
right?
The whole mob could want to kill you. But as long as you got that one protector, nobody will ever touch you.
Well, that one protector in Bobby Kennedy's case was John Kennedy. Or so he thought.
Or so he thought, until they said, you know what? Marcello said it. Carlos Marcello was in the Mississippi Delta at one of his vacation lodges. And he said, look, he was cursing the Kennedys. And they said, "Are you going to clip Bobby?" Then one of the guys asked him, "Are you going to whack Bobby?" And he says, "Why would I do that?" He says, "If you cut the tail off a dog, it keeps barking. You
Yeah.
got to cut the head off, he said. And then the tail
Yep.
and head go away once and for all. He goes, I'm taking out the head. And that's what he
Exactly.
said Marcelo. So Marcelo made this, and then working with all of the players, I said, to some degree or another, whether they closed their eyes, whether they allowed it to happen, or whether they took part,
Yeah.
the Mafia led the charge.
Lou,
And-
there's a guy in our chat room, Leon Barfield, says CIA was behind the assassination. What credibility, because I've heard that too.
Yeah.
What credibility do you give to the allegation that the Central Intelligence was behind
Yeah,
the hit on John Kennedy?
So, Leon, I'm not arguing with you. I said there's three moving parts here. There's three co-conspirators, the CIA, the mob, and the Cuban exiles. And all of the evidence points to all three. The Cuban exiles were involved with the mob at the time. The Cuban exiles, the CIA was involved with the Cuban exiles at the time. They trained them. And the CIA had powers and authorities that nobody had but them. And Allen Dulles, who was once head of the CIA but was axed by John Kennedy, is on the Warren Commission. And he does everything he can to hide it.
You're going to see that tonight, by the way, Lou. In fact, you know what? That's a great segue. Why don't we listen to this for just a second? You and I are going to I'm going to let this play. Let's just take a look at this here. I want everybody to just kind of consider what you're looking for. That's James Riddle Hoffa. Now, Lou, if there was ever a name that goes with a guy, it's this guy, James Riddle Hoffa, because his death was a riddle, and we're still talking about it today.
That's right.
Jimmy Hoffa, head of the most powerful labor union on planet Earth. Of course, John Kennedy, Dallas, Texas. All the stuff, all the notable documentaries. This is something that you don't see a lot, Lou. George Bush Sr., the Bush connection to the Kennedy assassination. We'll talk about this as well. But let's take a look. The guys who killed Kennedy, and there's a bunch of them. It was probably, Lou, the most well-oiled machine. If there's ever such a thing as the government working for a single cause, this was it. Check this out, folks. You're looking at Gerald Ford, Bertrand Russell, Allen Dulles. You're looking at John Dwyer, John McCoy, Hale Boggs. All of these guys were first and second year congressmen who went on to become senators, long-term senators, and one gentleman there that went on to become president of the United States. Okay, so don't tell me the fix wasn't in. If you're going to look at that, and by the way, there's Chief Justice Earl Warren, first picture. If you're going to look at this, folks, and tell me that this was a fair and balanced assessment of who killed John Kennedy, I got some swampland in Manhattan to sell you.
Ange, there are people who were on the Warren Commission who did not believe the final report of the Warren Commission. There were people on the Warren Commission who did not believe the magic bullet theory, which was complete hoax. Even Connolly, who was shot supposedly with the magic bullet, Governor Connolly, in the limousine, said, come on, this magic bullet's ridiculous. You think that I was hit by that? That's not, could never have happened.
By the way, Lou, one of those individuals you saw was Arlen Specter from Pennsylvania. Who became the longest running senator from Pennsylvania. He's the guy, ladies and gentlemen, if you can believe it, that gave us the single bullet magic bullet theory. Okay? If you believe that, once again, I got a piece of swampland in Midtown for you.
So
once
again,
let's talk about how how John Kennedy created, as I described it earlier, as the perfect storm for an assassination. He created it. Nobody did. I'm not a Kennedy fan. I'm especially not a Bobby Kennedy fan. I am as red state as you can get, brother. I am as red state as you can get. Gotta tell you though, man, if you look at America, 1963, 62, 63, at what was happening and what was going on internationally and domestically, it wasn't a real happy place to be, Lou.
Mhm.
And people lose track of that.
Heart
They
of the
lose sight of it was a bad time to be.
Heart of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people, when Kennedy got in, a lot of people felt like he did it with his father's money.
Yeah.
And the other thing they felt like these snot-nosed Ivy Leaguers who had their shirts open, their ties undone, kicking their feet up on the desks. This was unheard of to the elites in Washington at that time, to the
Yeah.
Allen Dulles who puffed on a pipe, to the J. Edgar Hoovers who made everybody tighten their necktie and dress and look and walk a certain way. These were very different people to them. And they felt like almost like not necessarily hippies, but sort of just like this new wave of individuals who really didn't understand how the real Darwinian world worked. And once again, to get back to Leon, I don't contest that the CIA did it. I do believe the CIA was involved to a large degree, but the CIA was working with other people at the time. And there's a tremendous amount of evidence that those other people play a part with the CIA. And that's what gave them the courage, I believe, and the confidence to think that they could get away with it. If your co-conspirator is the CIA, you pretty much got immunity from anything that happens because they're not going to throw themselves under the bus. So that's why I think after the assassination, within an hour of the assassination, there had to be a dozen people who were pulled in that were close to Marcello or directly connected to Carlos Marcello. That's not a coincidence. That's not
by no means. Oh, by no means is it a coincidence.
Mhm.
That was, in times like this, you're doing good to get 2 or 3 people to agree on any one thing.
Mhm.
Lou, the cogs in the wheel over here. You
Mhm.
got a lot of cogs in this wheel, brother.
Mhm.
You got a lot of moving parts here.
Mhm.
You got 3 main ones, but you got the octopus effect.
Mhm.
You got a lot of tentacles out there getting anybody not to rat, not to speak, not to
Mhm.
tip the bit, as it were. That takes some doing.
Correct.
My question for you, and
Mhm.
maybe I'm overthinking it, but my question for you is, who used what kind of power to get all of these people to shut up?
Well, I'm going to tell you. So I break it down in volume 2 of Borgata, A History of the American Mafia. Volume
there.
2 is Clash of Titans.
Mhm.
And I break it down, all of the moving parts and who was responsible for covering it up. Once you had Hoover, who does not want to admit that he had all of these tape recordings pass his desk. Once you have Allen Dulles, who does not want to admit that the entire CIA was working hand in hand with the Mafia to kill Fidel Castro. Once you have all of the senators and congressmen who were in the bag, who were in cahoots with the FBI and with the CIA.
Yeah.
Gerald Ford was touted by the FBI at once and by the CIA another time as our inside guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got Dulles there,
Mhm.
you got Hoover, who's got Ford reporting back to him, and it's sometimes reporting back to the CIA, although Dulles is there, so he really doesn't have to a lot. So you have inside people. Spectre, I'm sure, was reporting to people as well. You have all of these guys. Rankin, by the way, was one of the guys who was unhappy with a lot of things the Warren Commission did, but they sort of neutralized him time and again and got him to sort of sign on to things that he wasn't unwilling to sign on. By the way, here's a great story for you. After Ruby shoots Oswald, he's sitting in a Dallas jail, and he keeps saying, I want to talk, but I'm scared to do it here in Dallas. I want to talk, but I'm scared to do it in Dallas. So at some point, Earl Warren, I think Ford might have been with him, a couple of people, they went to visit Ruby in Dallas. I know Earl Warren was there. Don't quote me on Ford, but there were other people who went with him.
Gerald Ford was, in fact, there.
Oh, he was. Okay. So
I have the transcript and I have the film.
Okay. So now Ruby says, look, I can't talk here. Bring me back to Washington.
Yep.
And I'll talk. Now, Ruby, by the way, just so we know how it all works, if anybody doubts the mob was involved, Ruby was with Joe Civillo, was the underboss of the Dallas Mafia, or Campisi rather, Joe Campisi. Civillo was the Don, Campisi was the underboss. Those two guys answered directly because they were like a satellite Borgata to Carlos Marcello's Louisiana Empire.
Yeah.
They were with, Campisi was with Ruby the night before the assassination. And the first person to visit Ruby in jail is who? Joe Campisi, the underboss of the Mafia. Why would Campisi to go up to visit Ruby? You know why? I've been in jail. You know who you call? You call your skipper. You call somebody who's going to look out for you and tell him, I need a lawyer. I need help. I'm not going to talk about anybody. You know you could trust me. Just help me out. That's why Campisi goes up to see him. He wants to get a read on Ruby, calls for him, by the way, but he likes to get a read on Ruby and know how he's thinking, what he's looking at. Now, fast forward. Ruby's asking Earl Warren, look, do me a favor. Fly me back to Washington and I'll tell you everything you need to know, but I can't do it here. They'll kill me. I'm in Dallas. They control Dallas. The mob, I can't control. I don't have any control over the police. I don't trust the sheriff. I don't trust anybody here. Get me out of here. Earl Warren says, well, it's too much of an expense to bring them back. Okay. Too much of an expense. We spent about how many bazillions of dollars did we spend during the Cold War, but we can't get this guy a flight ticket back to Washington for one day to see what he has to say.
Remarkable, Lou. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at this. Just to give you some perspective as to what Lou's talking about. There's nothing better than to go back into the archives and take a look at this, Lou.
Let me have it. I want it.
By the way, Lou, when you look at this, Lee Oswald and Jack Ruby lock eyes. They know each other.
That's right. Now
they know each other, and you're going to see it on this film.
Here's another thing, Ange, too.
Yeah.
Notice when he's coming out. Yeah. Where is the protective police shield that's supposed to be around him?
Oh, wait a minute. I got a question for you. Let's watch this film. Okay. And then I got a question for you because something didn't sit right with me after watching this 200 or 300 times.
Let me just say one thing before you pull the trigger, Ange.
Yes, sir.
When they would take me from the feds to the state, because I had 3 cases at once. So the federal government was holding me in a federal detention center with my co-defendants. And then I had a state case by myself. So I'd have to get taken out to go to court in the state. When the state marshals would come to get me from the federal marshals, they would put me in a bulletproof vest. Yeah. They would shackle me around my wrists and my ankles. And then they would march me with a police guard to the car to take me to the state. And I would say to them, I never ratted. Nobody's trying to kill me. And they says, well, we don't know if your friends are going to ever try to break you out, maybe. So this is just a nobody. I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody, Ange. And they're treating me like I'm public enemy number 1 with a bulletproof vest on just to go from the feds to the state. Now you're taking the most wanted man in America. 80 million Americans want to murder this guy. And he's marched out without a bulletproof vest, without a police shield, without cops. They bookend him, and they're pretty much marching him out as a target.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. You're going to see something that flabbergasted me because it hit me. You know what, Lou? It was one of those I could have had a V8 moments, the aha moment. You got to watch this because I'm going to show you. Watch, folks. Watch along with me and Lou. Take a look at this.
Being let out by Captain Fritz. There is a person. There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. Absolute panic. Absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives have their guns drawn. There is no question about it. Oswald has been shot.
Tell me what you've noticed about that clip. Something that should be glaring to anybody that's ever been walked down through a police station, particularly from a holding area into the public area.
I mean, it just screams of incompetence or intentional.
Oh, yeah, it does. I'll tell you what else it screams of. Oswald is as wide open
Mhm.
as you could possibly get.
Mhm.
Notice Jim Lavelle, the guy, the tall,
With the hat.
yeah, with the white hat, yeah, the big man, 6'6", big strapping guy.
Mhm.
He's got Oswald by the right arm. A shorter, stocky fella has Oswald by the left, holding, not really holding his arm, but kind of like walking him through. The people behind Oswald, they're at least 6 to 8 feet behind him. They're not directly behind him.
Mhm.
If you're walking a prisoner of that magnitude from the holding area to the vehicle that's supposed to transport him, where's the perimeter?
Mhm.
Lou, there's no perimeter. There's no
Supposed to be a police guard. They don't even walk you into the marshals. Don't even walk you into court. That lackadaisical. In a regular nobody walks into court. The marshals don't even walk you in that way. That's how bad that was.
Yeah, let's just take a look at this.
Mhm.
Hold on.
At point blank range, fired into his stomach.
He is shot. He is shot. Oswald. It is Oswald. You are. Was that the man that shot the man, or do you?
And they take Jack Ruby. Watch this now. Follow me. Folks, you can check this out yourself if you think I'm kidding. They take Ruby from the public garage area to the back holding area. He's there overnight. Okay? Don't ask me how, Lou. But he managed to shower and shave, get a change of clothes, and have a completely different set of clothes on the next day. All right? That's a fact.
Mhm.
You could check it out. The other thing, I'm going to go back to here for just a second. Here you go. Look at Lee Oswald. There's no one behind him. There's not a person behind him. He's coming out that door unescorted. Jim Lavelle and the gentleman to on Oswald's left arm. That's it. That is it. The gentleman you see there with the white hat in the front with the glasses, that man's a sheriff's officer. Watch. Again, tell me if you see anybody behind Oswald.
No.
There's no one.
You're right. Yeah.
There's no one there. That smelled like set up from jump to me. That was a signal. If anybody back in the day caught it, it was a signal. Let you know this guy's going by, this guy's going away. You'll never find the answer to who killed your president. Here we are, 60 plus years later, and we're still talking about it. Okay. 61 years, Lou, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
It's the crime of the century in many, many ways.
Right on national television.
Yeah, on live TV.
The first ever mob hit, maybe the second, if we count Kennedy.
Yeah.
Because they had something to do with that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the first complete mob hit, and Ruby was acting, by the way, if you follow the moments from the assassination until he clips Oswald, nothing but fear that the mob is going to get rid of him for blowing it with Oswald. And they know that. He knows that, Ruby's throwing up, he's nauseous, he's pacing. Now, here's another thing. After he shoots him, if it was done, like some people say, spur of the moment, they say he was bent out of shape over losing his president. He made comments later. He says, if I loved him so much, how come I never voted for him? You know, I mean, he kind of unraveled that himself later on. But let's pretend for a moment, right? That he did it out of this act of instant spontaneity. Okay. Okay. If that's the case, there are so many things wrong with it, first of all. But if that's the
where
case,
do we begin, Lou?
Yeah, exactly. But if that's the case, why then was he connected to so many mob people leading up to it? And why did it all go away once Oswald was gone? And the other thing was when he sat right after, why this? Big question, why this? If he did it out of spontaneity, once he's sitting in the precinct and he's not sure if he's dead yet, you would be happy as you start to unwind. You'd say, son of a bitch, I hope he lives. I don't get the death sentence. Instead, when he hears he's dead, he's thrilled.
Yeah,
He's
thank
thrilled.
you.
He's thrilled.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Nobody even considered. America was such a naive place at the time. Nobody even thought about it.
It's still
I'm going to show you something that's rarely been seen, Lou.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen it, but have you ever seen the actual kill shot that killed President Kennedy from the direction that it came? This is taken from across the street at Dealey Plaza. This film was captured by Orville Nix, and you're going to see something that's never been seen before on, at least, well, it has on this program, but it has never been shown on television. And I'm going to show you something here. You're going to see the muzzle blast instantly, and then you're going to see the president go boom. Take a look at this. Let me bring this up for you. I was prepared for this one. Here you go. This is called the kill shot. Oop, hold on. Wrong one. I pulled up the wrong film, folks. Forgive me. Here it is. Hot damn. Why is it not letting me do this? Lou, it's not letting me do this for some damn reason. Anyway, now hold on just a second. Is it going to let me do this at all? Oh, here you go. Hot damn. This is called The Many Faces of Lee Harvey Oswald. Some people speculate, Lou, that CIA or FBI or both enlisted the help of lookalikes to pull this off. Kind of to stage, to put Oswald where they wanted him to be. If you look at the lineup, for lack of a better word, the lineup in front of you, there are many Oswalds. They're all, by the way, around the same age, but clearly different faces with similar looks. I could see one here with the military guy. There's one here with a helmet. There's the mug shot from the police station.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of different looking Oswalds in this. What are we to make of this? By the way, there's the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
He was wearing a police uniform,
Mm.
as you might expect somebody to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the actual kill shot. That is from across the street.
Mm.
It did come up for me. Thank you.
Mm.
You can actually see, if you look at that, you can actually see the guy's wearing a pair of glasses,
Mm-hmm.
which is remarkable.
Ange, are you familiar with the guy who was almost Oswald, the guy who was picked up in Chicago, the ex-Marine?
I am. Very much so.
That's interesting too, Ange. That's interesting because they were going to, just so your listeners know, they were going to try to clip him in Chicago first, Kennedy.
Yeah.
And they had the potential, the suspected assassins were picked up, and they had a guy who was sort of like they had made out this guy to be a little bit of a loner, a little bit off psychologically.
Yeah.
And he got a job in a building that was sort of overlooking the parade route, like the book depository.
Yeah.
And this poor bastard just missed being Oswald because somebody called up, maybe even Oswald, we don't know who it was, saying I was Lee. I think the guy used the name Lee, called up and said, hey, this is going to happen. And the Secret Service, who wasn't involved at that point, there was Secret Service people who did some shady things, I will say later. But the particular Secret Service agents in Chicago immediately rounded these guys up, and we don't know why, but they let them go. And there's no real record of what took place. But they have enough information to say that it looks like what would have been Kennedy's assassination and a fall guy taking the rap like Oswald did in Chicago, but it was called off. We also have Miltia making comments. You're familiar with Miltia, and that he was going to buy it. This was done in Miami, in Florida.
Yeah.
And he said that Kennedy was going to buy it. So if you think about it, where are the places where Kennedy might buy it? Just so you know, even though I agree with Leon, once again, to rewind back, CIA, okay, I get it. But who's the CIA working with? They're going to either clip first Kennedy in Chicago, then maybe in Florida, and ultimately in Dallas. Who owns those three places? Chicago.
Interesting choice. Dallas, Texas, Lou, that was a really interesting choice. Not serendipitous. That was a deliberate choice. And I believe the Lyndon Johnson connection, and I'll get into that, and then the governor Connolly. For sure.
Yeah.
Moonchild is in our chat room. She says, didn't Jim Lavelle say to Oswald that if someone takes a shot at you today, I hope he has good aim and doesn't get me?
I could imagine it. I can't remember if I read that or not, but it totally sounds like I think I remember something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe I remember that as well. Let's take a look at this, Lou. This is the man they called the badge guy, hiding in plain sight. You are looking, Lou Ferranti, for the first time probably anywhere. The actual shooter shooting President Kennedy from up on the grassy knoll behind the fence. You are actually looking at him, circled in that area. It's the first time it's ever been captured on film, and to the point where they could get it steady.
You know what the best film must be, and I wish we had it, and we know they do? The Babushka Ladies film.
Oh, I have it. Her name is Beverly Oliver. There's a problem with her, too. Here's why. On a couple different levels, two different levels. Number one, Beverly Oliver says she was the Babushka lady. People at the time, at the scene, who eyewitnessed the Babushka lady said she was between 50 and 60 years of age. Beverly Oliver is still alive today, and she's 83 years old. So how is she between 50 and 60 in 1963, and she's only 80 plus years old today? Either A, she lied about being there, or she's trying to create some kind of false flag event. But she's clearly, she can't be the Babushka lady.
No, but that's the best tape. That tape would have been the best. That tape never stopped. Whoever she was, she kept going. Yeah.
We thankfully, the Freedom of Information Act is a wonderful thing. Yeah. We have the Babushka lady film. I don't have it queued up, but we have the film. We could certainly queue it up. There you go. There's the shooter. He's right there. The people who did this work for IBM. And we deal with a lot of different people on the show, but this is probably the most famous photograph. Oh, let's go right back to it. Here it is. Hot damn. There we go. This is probably the most famous photograph from across the street, because you're not seeing the enhanced photo like you did in the previous slide. You're seeing the president already hit once. The kill shot comes right after, and then chaos ensues. This is the guy they claim to have seen. That Lee Harvey Oswald is not the same Lee Harvey Oswald that exited the Dallas Police Department. If they wanted to create a smokescreen, Lou, they did a masterful job, because we're going to be 60 years from now. We're still going to be wondering who killed John Kennedy and who was behind it. We'll never know.
And they called David Ferry, who was connected to Marcello, the CIA, and the Cuban exiles. Once again, they called David Ferry, the exiles did. They named him the quote unquote master intriguer. They thought he was an absolute genius for weaving intricate conspiracies. That was his thing. And he was the guy who supposedly said, and here's another thing that will one day come out. He had made a comment prior to the assassination that the ultimate way to do it in Dealey Plaza was a triangulation of fire.
Yeah.
3 places the bullets had to come from. So I believe one is grassy knoll, obviously, was the kill shot.
Yes.
2, I believe somebody fired from the book depository.
Absolutely.
I do believe. And also, too, I'm going to tell you right now, one day it may come out. Jim Brading, who changed his name from Braden to Brading.
Yep.
He was in the Daltex building, and he had
right
no
across
excuse,
the street.
no excuse for being there, and they let him go. And he was completely 100% out of place, other than being there as an assassin. And he gave this phony story. I was running up inside the building to make a phone call, and then I ran back down. And his story even contradicts himself, because he said he didn't know how to get upstairs, he didn't know how to get downstairs, but he did it. He was in there, and I believe a shot was fired from there too. And there's another interesting thing. There was the deaf guy, I'm sorry, the guy who believed he was mute, and he believed. What was he? He believed it was he believed he saw people from the overpass also.
Yes. There were, and it's on film.
Right.
We
so
have it on film.
If they would have had Kennedy pass through a complete ambush zone, I mean, this was like a kill zone. I mean, you want to talk about that. When they killed Paul Castellano, you had shooters on the sidewalk. You had backup shooters across the street. You had Tony Roach Rampino running around in case anybody got away. This is just mob guys. And they had a kill zone.
Yeah.
Now just take that to 1 degree higher. Throw David Ferry, throw the CIA, throw everybody else into it, and they're going to take a roll the dice on one imbecile in the book depository.
Interesting. Here's the thing, Lou. This is a really interesting question from Darrow Willie. A guy named James Flies admits to killing John Kennedy. What's your opinion on that? Do you know who James Flies is?
I haven't even come across him.
Oh, James Files. I don't know. Darryl, if you're still with me, who is James Files? I've never heard that name in association with this case. What about the theory that police officer Tippit Oswald killed so they could use his body to fake JFK's autopsy? That's absolutely true. The autopsy photos you see of John Kennedy are not John Kennedy. They are J.D. Tippit. That's fact. It's already been proven forensically by A, Dr. Michael Bodden, and B, Dr. Cyril Wett. Shooter and extortioner. No,
that was just Roselli talking shit.
Yeah, I don't think so. Again, let's take a look at this. Oh, there we go. Here you go. I referred to this a moment ago. Lou, there's our man, Mr. Rubenstein, Jack Ruby. Fresh, clean clothes on the very next morning. He's supposed to have been spent the night in the police cell. It looks pretty dapper for a guy who spent the night in the police cell. By the way, again, there's Lee Oswald. Nobody behind him. Another one. Here you go. The shooter. Not something not right about that picture. Never was. Again, nobody behind Oswald. At least 5 or 6 feet behind him is the closest guy. Anyway,
he's being marched out like a shooting duck, Ange.
Oh, it's craziness. It's absolute craziness. Okay, let me see.
The other thing too is Chief Curry. I think it was Chief Curry who had to take a phone call from Mayor Cabell and couldn't be there. They either one of two things happened. If Curry was guilty of something, he knew to stay away. He didn't want to be part of it. If Curry was completely innocent, which is also possible, then he was pulled away for the phone call so he wouldn't be in the firing line, wouldn't be anywhere near it because they couldn't get him in on it.
Yeah.
But something's wrong with all of a sudden, this is the biggest thing, and Chief Curry can't be down there, and he's got to take a phone call from Mayor Cabell, who, by the way, Mayor Cabell is another one who hated Kennedy. Mayor Cabell's brother was General Cabell, who was fired also by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs. They took a dump on him. So
the other thing, Lou, you mentioned, I mentioned a few moments ago, it's no accident Dallas, Texas was chosen. John F. Kennedy was not a popular figure in Texas. Not at all. He was not
One,
loved or liked.
one other thing, Ange, too, which is what I wanted to say earlier. Think about the three places that they were contemplating hitting him. It ended up being Dallas, but if you think about the three, so the three mob bosses who were supposedly involved in it, let's just say supposedly for any doubters out there.
Yeah.
But if you read my book, you'll see who's involved. The three mob bosses are Sam Giancana he controls Chicago. Santo Trafficante, he controls Florida. Those are the first two places that they wanted to hit him and didn't. The last place they chose was Dallas. Who controls Dallas but Carlos Marcello? Those are the three bosses who worked with the CIA, and those are the three bosses who control those three places. It's not a mistake. It's not a coincidence that those were the three places that they were lining up to kill Kennedy.
Absolutely.
Controlled by the mob, controlled by the three bosses that are working with the CIA, first to kill Castro, and then at some point or another, David Ferry, the quote-unquote master intriguer, says, why are we going to bother? We can't get Castro. Let's skip Castro. We kill Kennedy, we get our invasion of Cuba. And here's the other thing. They were supposed to, I think Ruby's job from the start, Ruby was a mob guy. Look into this, please, everyone. Ruby was a mob guy. The Warren Commission ignored it. There's thousands of pieces of evidence that came out later with the House Assassinations Committee. Ruby was heavily connected to mobsters. So Ruby, I believe it was his job to dispose of Oswald after the assassination and make it look like he ran to Cuba and was hiding in Cuba. And that was the whole ordeal about some guy faking him in Mexico trying to get a visa for Cuba. They wanted Oswald. They wanted it to look like so that the United States could say, hey, the guy who killed Kennedy is a fugitive now in Cuba.
Yeah.
And Castro goes, I don't have him. He's lying, that bearded MFer. Let's go get him.
Exactly. Lou, you mentioned the name. I got about 15 minutes left, and I want to spend about 10 of that 15 minutes talking about Jim Braden. Let's talk about James Big Jim Braden. You and I both know who he is. You and I both know his connection. Let's talk to everybody about the importance of a name that they don't even know. Most people. Tell everybody who Jim Braden was, please.
Jim Braden is a guy, he's got a horrible criminal record. He's involved with the mob throughout his life. He's involved with frauds. He's involved with white-collar crime, blue-collar crime, you name it, he's involved with it. All of a sudden, he's on parole. And he changes his name before he leaves for Texas, before he leaves for Dallas. He changes his name, gets a phony driver's license with a different name on it, and then tells his parole officer, I'm going to Texas for something or another. And now he's in Texas on the day of the assassination suddenly. After Kennedy's dead and the car zips away, heading to the hospital, and the police all of a sudden raid the book depository in the grassy knoll. 77 out of like 90 something people pointed to the grassy knoll and said the shots came from there. All of those people, even Jacqueline Kennedy, everybody in Connolly, you name it. Those were the first original conspiracy theorists. Weren't me, you, and everybody listening here. The original conspiracy theorists were Jacqueline Kennedy, Governor Connolly, and everybody else who believed this was a line of crap that they fed us. But anyway, they run up to the grassy knoll. Some guys run to the book depository, and other guys went by the Deltax building thinking shots came from there, just as equally from the book depository. They both had a line into Dealey Plaza. At that time, somebody picks up Braden as a suspicious looking guy. Cop picks him up. Says, what are you doing here? He says, well, I don't know. I was coming out of the building and I heard somebody told me the president was shot. So I ran upstairs to make a phone call and then I couldn't get through whatever. And I came back down and here I am. So they take him in. He gives his fake name. So when he gives the fake name, he doesn't come up as a guy with 30 felony convictions. He comes up as some doo-doo-doo. They don't know who he is. They let him go. He leaves. Because of the cover-up, nobody ever goes back to this guy and says, what the frig was he doing in the Deltax building on that day, connected to all of these mob guys, connected maybe to the CIA on top of it. And all of a sudden he flies in, Kennedy's killed, and he flies out. And he got a different name before he went in. Come on.
Yeah.
This guy's
remarkable.
Sin. Yeah.
Darryl Willie has a question for you. Do you guys have any idea who killed Officer J.D. Tippit? I do. A witness said she saw two people. What do you think about that one, Lou, let's
There's
talk
a lot
about
of there's conflicting testimony on that one. A couple of things is the one theory is it wasn't Oswald. Another theory is possibly, if Tippit was a dirty cop, and if Tippit's job was to maybe get rid of Oswald, maybe bring him to Ruby, maybe get rid of him. I don't know. Maybe Ruby was nearby at the time. I don't know. Whatever the case was, because he was walking in the direction of Ruby's apartment, Oswald was. So whatever the case was, maybe Oswald, if let's say it was him, for argument's sake, he might have got spooked by Tippit and got the jump on him. That's a possibility. Other than that, maybe it wasn't Oswald. We don't know. There's conflicting testimony on that one, Ange.
Remarkable. I'll tell you, Lou, I would like to have you back every week, man. Well, we could say we're friends, right? We're friends.
We are friends now, Ange. We're friends.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I hooked you up with Rita Gigante. I hope she comes on your show.
Yeah, she's coming on.
Great.
She'll be here April 9th. I'm going to tell everybody about that one.
Yeah.
Lou Ferrante is the author of Mob Rules, Borgata, the trilogy Borgata, Rise of Empire, Clash of Titans, Unlocked Inside the Gangster's Code, and the television series Inside the Gangster's Code. I believe that's right.
Yeah. I went into prisons all around the world for Discovery Channel.
It's amazing. You guys look him up online if he's selling a book anywhere near you, if he's doing a signing, if he's doing an excerpt reading. Go see Lou Ferrante. Tell him Angelo sent you. Tell him the Mad Dog sent you, baby. Lou, I gotta have you back often as I can, as often as your publicist will let me have you, or whenever you're free. Because brother, you are like a treasure trove for a talk show. We live for guys like you. Tomorrow night, join us, actor, television and film actor Ronnie Marmo. I'll get it. Ronnie Marmo will be here. Ronnie is a returning guest. You'll see him in Criminal Minds with Joe Montana on the Ion Network and on a stage near you. He's an amazing theatrical actor. His latest show, I'm Not a Comedian, I'm Lenny Bruce, is getting rave reviews around the country. Check him out at a theater near you. We also have a very, very special show, Justice for Heather. Was she murdered by her husband? Did somebody else do it? Was there a family of influence, wealth, and power involved? Oh, man, this is a sad, sad case with all the makings of a great whodunit. Sadly, a young lady is dead, and nobody seems to want to come forward to help. We will have people from her family and a community volunteer, a brave, I should say, community volunteer that will be here to put a light on this so sad case, Justice for Heather. Amazing. Check it out, folks. It's in our previews. Let's see what else we got coming up here. I want to check this out over here. We got some amazing stuff coming up. Do you know who Kenny Presley is? Kenny Presley says that he is Elvis Presley's son. Says he's got the DNA to prove it. Says he's got the paperwork to prove it. I have never heard of him, but we're all going to hear of him shortly because he's coming on the show.
Does he have that white suit to prove it? That he used to dance in Vegas?
He's got several, actually. Is he just another Elvis wannabe, or does, as he says, does he have real proof? Well, then he's going to have to check with his brother, Elvis Presley Jr., another guy who says that he's Elvis's kid. I'll tell you what, doesn't surprise me, because Elvis banged everything that wasn't nailed down, for crying out loud. But, ladies and gentlemen, we got to have Lou. We got to have you back at some point. I'll let you go a few weeks, 3-4 weeks, get your breath again. But we're going to come back. We're going to talk about some more stuff. I got so much stuff I want to talk about.
We'll do it again, Ange. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, had a great talk with you. Thanks, Ange. Good night to you.
On behalf of Lou Ferrante, I am Mad Dog DeCipio. Take care, folks. We'll see you next time on What's the Buzz, America's Best Podcast. Bye-bye.